Deep within the bowels of the Grey Knight's fortress monastery on Titan, in a place said to be the tomb of the great Malcador the Sigillite, is a simple wooden box. Kept under arcane lock and key, this small box can only be opened by a Grand Master of the Grey Knights. Within it, written upon a simple piece of ancient parchment, is an imperial doctrine known as the Terminus Decree. Officially unofficial, this decree is said to hold a secret directive so powerful that it could bring down the entire Imperium or save it in its darkest hour. Or at least, that's how it used to be. With the recent reveals from the new Grey Knights Codex for Warhammer 40k 10th edition, the truth of the Terminus Decree has been revealed, and it's quite surprising to say the least. We're going to go over this new revelation, as well as its implications, and come up with some theories about what it could mean for the setting going forward. Welcome back to Starhammer. Games Workshop's hatred of the Grey Knights goes beyond the tabletop, it seems. The Terminus Decree finally being revealed, the online community for 40k has been foaming at the mouth about its contents, and I'd say for good reason. Let's read it. Held in a simple wooden box that only the Supreme Grand Master may open, the Terminus Decree details the Emperor's final command to the Grey Knights chapter. The Master of Mankind can never be allowed to leave the Golden Throne, either return to life, reborn in another's body, or ascend as some kind of warp entity. And if he does, the Grey Knights must return him to his terrible duty. Indeed, they were created with the possibility of this event in mind. A task beyond the abilities of any other force in the Imperium. The decree offers no guidance on how such feats might be achieved, for it is neither a weapon nor a magic formula. Rather, the Grey Knights would themselves be the weapon on such a desperate day, one that would likely have to cut a path through the ranks of the Custodian Guard and many others to see its duty done. So there's a lot to unpack here. Like, a whole lot. I'm not entirely sure what angle to even come at this with, so I'm going to start with what I think is most important and branch out from there. The Emperor being on the Golden Throne is probably one of the most important aspects of the current 40k setting. In his limited state, the Emperor might not be moving around much, but is still quite active in the warp. He bestows miracles upon his followers, keeps the fractured webway entrance beneath the throne closed, else Terra be overrun by the demons of the warp, and is able to power the Astronomicon rather effectively, being as how he is essentially right next to the thing, as well as just generally helping out humanity when he can. All of those are pretty important to the Imperium's ability to function and survive. Despite not being able to directly rule his empire or command his armies, the Emperor is still very much serving the Imperium. Ironically, humanity's faith in him as a god actually makes him even more powerful and enables him to do more in the warp to combat the powers of chaos. Obviously, the Emperor never intended to have to sit in time out for eternity on the Golden Throne, yet his doing so is actually so integral to the survival of humanity that he has to stay on it. At least, as far as we know, that's the only way for the fragile ecosystem of the Imperium to continue to function. It's all well and good, but why did the Emperor need to issue this decree to the Grey Knights to keep him on the thing? Why not issue it to his eternally loyal Custodian Guard? Why would the Emperor, if he were able, get off the throne if it would doom his Imperium? And the Emperor isn't dumb. Surely he recognizes this conundrum. There are a couple different ways this could go, which I assume the Emperor anticipated as possibilities and had to have a capable force to keep him in check. Let's start with the Dark King phenomenon. The Dark King is a theorized fifth Chaos God, long prophesied by the Eldar and humanity throughout the ages, but this fifth Chaos God was, in fact, meant to be the Emperor. The Emperor himself was aware of this possible fate and came very close to taking up that mantle. At the climax of the Horus Heresy, when the Emperor was preparing to face Horus, he knew that unless he amped himself up to the extreme, there's a very real possibility he could lose to his superpowered Chaos Horus. So he proceeded to call upon every ounce of warp power he could muster. Fueling himself with the raw energies of the universe, the Emperor began to ascend to godhood. He was talked down from it by an old friend and fellow perpetual, Olanius Person, who reminded the Emperor of his own humanity and helped buy him enough time against Horus for the Emperor to defeat him. That tale's a bit more detailed than that, but you get the idea. Dark King, bad. It would have resulted in Terra, at the very least, being consumed by the Emperor and humanity possibly going the way of the Eldar. Another possibility, one hinted at in the decree, is the prophecy of the Star Child, also known as the Numen, or Chaos Child. Just as the new man of the Emperor was born from the collective souls of all the ancient human shamans, the Star Child is theorized to be the reborn Emperor of mankind from his current form. As the Emperor's spirit spends more time in the warp, it becomes more and more fractured. Star Child is said to be the last fragment of the Emperor that represents his compassion for humanity. So long as that fragment survives, so too does humanity. The Emperor being in a fractured state is pretty well known. His meeting with the resurrected Guilliman was this agonizing assault on his son from 1,000 different voices, shouting 1,000 different things in his mind as the Emperor tried to summon all of himself to commune with Guilliman. Rumor has it that this group, the Illuminati, that Illuminati, are working to bring the Emperor back through the fulfillment of this prophecy, which involves the Sensei. Sensei are said to be the actual true sons of the Emperor, like from the balls kind of sons. These guys are immortal and have a fraction of the Emperor's power within them. They can allegedly be blessed by this shard of the Emperor and act as its champions, analogous to a champion of the Chaos powers. Where the Illuminati come into play is that they plan to get a bunch of the Sensei together for a final battle against Chaos and then sacrifice them all to the Emperor right before he dies, just as the shamans sacrificed themselves to create the Emperor all those years ago. In theory, this will lead to the second coming of the Emperor in physical form. With its psychic awakening from the Eye of Terror going nuts, this prophecy has picked up a lot of steam throughout the Imperium. Psychers across the galaxy, starting in the Cementum Solar, have begun to have visions of a golden infant with radiant light rising off a throne. Even the Black Templars have had similar visions of a divine golden child coming to walk amongst the physical realm from the throne. This theory has a bit of credibility, as even guys like Corpheron are aware of it and are trying to actively stop it. Now, these legends and tales run a lot deeper, but that's not what this video is about. What this is about is finding out why the Emperor ordered such a decree right before his entombment, especially to the Grey Knights. It seems to me that the Emperor was aware of the dangers that either of these outcomes would produce. He has to be on the Golden Throne in order for humanity to survive. He understood that. He was also aware that being wholly within the warp was going to totally fuck him up and fracture him. I don't remember who said this, but in the Dark Imperium book series, there's a discussion about the Emperor coming off the throne, and it was cautioned that whoever they plugged into the throne might not be who comes off of it, if that day ever came. So why the Grey Knights? Well, the Custodes, ever loyal to the Emperor, would never do anything to harm him. Even the Star Child on the throne, which they would probably see as him, but in a different Fortnite skin. The Emperor is also the most powerful Psyker to ever live, and would probably still be so if he returned to the mortal realm. With the Thousand Suns and Magnus no longer an option, the Emperor needed to have a backup plan against the entity he might one day become. While an individual Grey Knight would be no match for the Emperor or his Custodes, the entire chapter might actually stand a chance at subduing the Emperor. Perhaps it's not the Emperor wanting to get off the Golden Throne in this case, but an entirely different individual. The Emperor knows his duty, and only in death does duty end, as the saying goes, so the Terminus Decree must mean that whatever leaves the Golden Throne isn't who was put on it. Now, I think this is more lazy writing on GW's part than the Emperor being a moron, but it seems like they didn't account for the Sisters of Silence, which are a little sub-faction of the Custodes made up of psychic blanks, a passive innate ability to nullify psychic powers, and they're also the premier witch hunters of the Imperium, so they know their shit. Now, while the Grey Knights are immensely powerful psychers, without those powers, they're just Space Marine. Even though their gene seed comes directly from the Emperor, they would either be totally blanked out or severely limited in their capabilities once the Sisters came along. While I have no doubts that the Grey Knights wouldn't resort to violence to fulfill their decree right off the bat, what if it did come to that? Maybe the Star Child or whatever wouldn't even need to rely on the Custodes and the Sisters and just Dr. Manhattan the Grey Knights out of existence. Without their psychic powers, though, I really do feel like the Custodes would make short work of the Grey Knights. I'm sure the Grey Knights could take out a few Custodian Guard, but at the end of the day, I don't think it's going to be that much of a challenge for the Custodians. Whether or not the Grey Knights succeed in this final order is irrelevant, though. What matters is that they fulfill their duty or die trying, as any good Space Marine would. Personally, though, I think that this could be a setup for the next edition of Warhammer 40k. Now, this is just a game theory. I'm shooting blind spitballs here, but every edition has its big bad or spectacular event to kick it off and set the scene. Last edition, it was the Fourth Tyrannic War. Maybe in the next one, it's the Emperor getting off the throne. Just imagine how apocalyptic that would be. The Imperium, reeling from the resurrection of their god Emperor, who turns out to be the biggest threat this galaxy has ever faced. Maybe that'll look like the addition of a new faction themed for the Star Child's armies, something along those lines. Is that gonna happen? Probably not, as it would turn the entire fucking setting on its head in a big end time scenario, which 40k doesn't really need. The stories and settings are written in a way that, for the most part, Players can make their own stories that fit into the universe. Most things are written in a very open-ended way, and that's by design to allow us to craft the universe around our tabletop battles and really drive home the point of endless war. More realistically, I think we'll see a lot more activity from the Golden Throne in the near future. Something to shake it up and leave us in suspense for the grimdark future. I'd like to see that personally. While there's a ton of different implications for the Terminus Decree, and while it wasn't very fleshed out despite being this big mystery, I think that backlash is a little justified. It was relatively lackluster and poorly written. Maybe that's by design to allow us to come up with our own theories. Who can know the infinite wisdom of James' workshop? One thing's for sure, the Terminus Decree being revealed is going to send ripples throughout Warhammer going forward, and I, for one, pretty excited to see where it takes us next. That's it for this one, y'all. What did you think of the big reveal, and what do you think it means for Warhammer 40k going forward? What are your theories? Let me know in the comments. As always, drop a like if you like it, a subscribe if you really liked it. Don't forget to check out the community tab for shitposts and shenanigans. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a video, and I'll see y'all in the next one.